Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this, the last session on the second day of the Digital Transformation in Government Conference, hosted in Ottawa, but presented virtually. Today, we're very fortunate to have folks from the Communication Security Establishment and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity presenting the Canadian Cyber-Audit Framework and the Communication Security Establishment ASTRA software demonstration and cybersecurity audit tools. The four presenters are Robert Fox. He's the Senior IT Auditor over at CSE, Communications Security Establishment. He's been part of the internal audit for 10 years and been involved in a wide range of IT engagements, auditing application system and network development, governance, operations, security, and risk management. He's a former IT audit manager at Audit Services Canada and has over 30 years auditing across many Government Canada departments and agencies. He holds degrees in commerce and public administration from Carleton University and has been a certified information systems auditor since 1987. Heather Belanger is the Senior IT Auditor over at the Communication Security Establishment. She's been part of the internal audit team for 12 years and has been involved in a wide range of engagements, including internal controls, IT security, and data analytics. Heather holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in criminology from Carleton University, is a certified internal auditor, and has a diploma in security management. For the second part of the presentation, you'll be having Larry Stoddard, who's the Senior Security Architect, Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. He's a retired communications officer from Royal Canadian Air Force and had worked at the Communication Security Establishment since 9/11. He's one of the authors of the Information Technology Standards Guidance, ITSG 33. Security Guidance 33 and leads the development of the functional requirements for ASTRA, which is the software. Larry has a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Alberta. And also, we have Brian Thompson, who's a leader developer of ASTRA Communications at the Communication Security Establishment. He's a lead developer, and he's a graduate of Algonquin College Computer Engineering Technology program. He was part of the original team of students, just to plug the education and getting involved with government that we had earlier, that developed ASTRA as a class project and was hired by CSE after graduation to continue its development. So we're delighted that you could make the time to present. And now I will turn it over to Brian and Heather Robert and Heather for the first part of the presentation. Now, this is going to be different than the other ones. What we're going to do is we'll have the first part of the presentation by Heather and Robert, and then we'll be asking questions. So put your questions in as they give their presentation. At about halfway through, we'll answer some of the questions, and then we'll go over to Brian and Larry afterwards, and then you can ask the questions with respect to their software demonstration afterwards. Okay, without further ado, over to you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Bob. Thank you very much. First, thank you for putting these conferences on every year. They clearly get better and better each year. And thank you for giving us the opportunity at CSE and the CSE Cyber Center to present our public offerings. The presentation, as you said, will be in two parts. So we'll talk about the cybersecurity audit program first, and then Brian and Larry will talk about the ASTRA tool. I won't introduce it. I'll let them deal with that themselves. So hi, I'm Robert Fox with Heather Belanger from Internal Audit at the Communication Security Establishment, or CSE, here in Ottawa. Our presentation today is on auditing cybersecurity, whether you're an auditor in the federal, provincial, municipal, or territorial government, or in the private sector. Our focus, as you can see from the title page, is auditing the top 10 cybersecurity actions that your organization is currently taking to mitigate risks posed by cyber threats. Go to the next slide, and we'll pass on the copyright and go to the third one. So our presentation isn't just on the audit program that we've produced and posted for you to pick up, but it's also to let you know about the different ways that you can use the audit program and the tools that go along with it. And we'll make that information available to you at the end of our brief presentation. Next. So we talk about the CSE top 10. These are the top 10 cyber threats generally that was found in government, but they're certainly consistent for all governments and for most organizations. So when we put together the audit program, we actually had direction from a couple departments who asked us to do three things: make the audit program written in plain language, which we think we've done. If the audit program was written pretty much for people that auditors who have never kind of delved into cyberspace, so there's a bit of a learning curve, and this is in part what some of the audit tools are there to help them with. So if you've never done any work in cyberspace or never audited, you are going to have to learn a few new terms like patching systems, hardening systems, administrator privileges, and managing devices. But what we've done in one of our tools, which is an audit guide, as we've defined all those key terms for you and made those available. The other direction we had was it had to be Canada-centric as much as possible. Well, we know a lot of what goes on in terms of understanding cyberspace and auditing in cyberspace is pretty much consistent around the planet. But we have used the top 10 because these were found in order to be the top 10 risks and the top 10 areas of focus where departments and organizations can get their most bang for the buck in terms of mitigating cyber risk. And it goes from 1 to 10, went down from 1 to 10. The other, again, was that it had to be an introductory level program. But what we like to think is if you as an internal auditor are capable of auditing the most complex programs in your department or organization, then we think you'll be able to use the cybersecurity audit program and the tools that we posted. Next slide, please. So just as a quick look, I know you won't be able to read these, but we just wanted to make it clear quickly about the 4 documents that we posted. If you look at the bottom right, the bottom left, you'll see it's a one page or it's a placemat with the top 10 cybersecurity list in the middle. On either side, it has the criteria and the sub-criteria. So if you just take a quick look, you can get a sense of what it is that we're covering in our audit program. At the top left, you'll see the cybersecurity audit guide. What we've done there is it's intended to introduce the reader to the topics of cybersecurity and to explain why your organization's chief audit executive needs to become involved in providing senior management with assurance or advice or guidance based on cybersecurity engagements. And there are so many different engagement types, different levels that an audit team can choose from using these tools. The audit guide explains that, and it explains to some extent some of the expertise you'll need when you're doing cyber audits. Some of them don't require any expertise, but we've explained all that in the audit guide. If you look at the, so my stuff is kind of covered here. If you look at the top right, we've developed what we call the Cybersecurity Preliminary Survey Tool. We like to refer to it as PST. That's because every engagement should have a planning phase and a preliminary survey of the topics to be covered. The PST guides the audit or review team regarding what documents to gather and what questions to ask. The initial review of this information can help the audit team to focus on those areas of greatest risk to the organization. And our fourth tool, and by far the largest, is the audit program itself. And we have a quick look at one page in the bottom right. The audit program provides the audit criteria, sub-criteria, and the reference sources where those sub-criteria were obtained from. The audit program is by far the largest document, providing the audit team with the ability to cover a wide range of cyber threats and controls. The document itself is quite big, so there are multiple uses and focus that you can use with the audit program, and Heather will talk about that now. Heather?
Bob. So as Bob mentioned, the preliminary survey tool is part of the planning process. So it's a planning tool. And what it's used for is to gather information related to each of the top 10. So this is just a preview of part of it. So just to give you a sense for what it looks like. So the tool, the idea behind the tool is that it gives the auditor a sense of what is in place for each of the areas. And they can quickly get to this information by using like the preliminary interviews with stakeholders. So they can record the information in a template, and then they're able to sort of prioritize the areas and choose which areas in the audit program that they're going to put into their actual audit plan. So in the T and F column there, the auditor can put either a true or false if the control is in place, or they can put a TBD, which will, and then you can record what evidence they're still looking for, or information they're still looking for, or if there's other point of contacts that, that they need to go back and revisit that area. So the results of the preliminary survey tool come out as sort of a scorecard, if you will. And by no means are we done at this point. This is just like we said, sort of just a part of the planning phase. But this scorecard gives you a sense for where, in a visual, sort of what the areas are that you might want to focus more in, and then pull from the audit program, the actual audit program. So, and when we tested the tools, we put this sort of scorecard into the plan. So senior management can really get a sense for the areas that we covered and during the preliminary survey phase, and then also which areas and why. They can quickly see why, you know, we focused on certain areas. So we found that very helpful. So this is just a quick snapshot of what the audit program looks like itself. So it includes criteria, it has sub-criteria, it has the tests, some of the tests that are included for each section. So it covers all of the top 10, 1 through 10, and then we also added a section for governance and risk management related to cybersecurity. So again, depending on the results of the preliminary survey tool, you can pick and choose the criteria that you really feel like, based on risk and based on areas where the audit really needs to focus. And because every organization is so different, that's why we, you know, design the tools this way, so that the actual engagement plan can be built based on the situation, the current situation. So there's so many different ways that the tools can be used. We talked about this a little bit already, but some of the different options. So we just to outline them here. So you can take the tools and you can either do just focus on governance and risk management. So those sections are in the audit program, so you can pull those right out of there. The other option is to audit one network. So for this one, you would look at potentially the riskiest network in your organization and focus on that one, and then meet with the stakeholders responsible for that network and go through the whole preliminary survey tool on that specific network. Another option is to choose one of the top 10 areas and then go across your whole organization. So again, using the preliminary survey tool, you can interview multiple stakeholders, get a sense for if there's a certain area within the top 10 that is riskier, and then go enterprise-wide to look at that one area. And then the last one would be to focus on compliance. So we have highlighted in the audit program areas where, for Treasury Board compliance, where you can test to see, you can pull those out right out of the audit program to see where you are in terms of compliance. So our tools can be found on the Cyber Center website under tools, and this is exactly what the page looks like. So you can click right on each of the 4 tools here, and then it'll bring you right to the actual document. You can see on the right, I can't see that part. Oh yeah, so the actual hyperlink is on the bottom right of your screen, and then we also have an audit at cyber.gc.ca that if you ever want to get in touch with us, you have questions about the tools, or if you want a more sort of in-depth presentation, we're happy to do that as well. That's right there. So in terms of next steps for this project, so we do plan to update the tools and potentially make a more streamlined version based on some of the information coming up from the Cyber Center. We're trying to keep at pace with them, which has been a little bit difficult because they're you know, they're moving at such a rapid pace, but so we're trying to we're hoping to update our tools to keep pace with that. And then we're planning to create some additional tools, so a compliance-based audit program, and then also cloud security audit program. And again, this is how you will contact us if you would like more information or have any questions for us, or visit the website to pick up our tools. And that is all I have.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Heather and Robert. I appreciate that. I've got a couple of questions for you. Are there audits that have used your tool, and if yes, have they published their audit reports?
There are departments that are using it, or portions of it, but they usually just call us and ask us questions. They don't give us a status report, so we don't have a clear answer for you. But we do know a couple departments are actually using the tools.
Okay, great. And the next question is, how risky are Canadian companies and departments prone to high-profile ransomware attacks that have recently occurred in the U.S.?
Well, we won't issue a number, but as you're aware, the incidents of ransomware they're increasing. There's no question about it, and the risks are higher. Hopefully, the companies are mitigating as they go, and obviously, whatever's in the news should be helping people realize that the risks are increasing. We produce some of these documents more in terms of giving chief audit executives and in companies to chief risk officers options in terms of their internal audit groups, how they can play a role in informing departments and companies where they stand, hopefully before an incident occurs. But the rates of ransomware are definitely increasing, not just in Canada, but around the world.
All right. I'm just curious, do you offer briefings and sessions to private sector as well as public sector?
CSE has a fairly broad outreach in terms of Canadian infrastructure. And I believe there's I don't have it, I'm sorry, an enumerated list of those that areas the federal government has identified as that we're eligible to support. And that list actually expands every year. So the answer is broadly yes. If you contact CSE, and I believe you're capable of doing that on the website, people will get back to you in terms of doing presentations. There's outreach at different levels, but the answer is generally yes. I'm sorry, I don't have that list with me at the moment.
Okay. No, I was just wondering if a company phoned you as to whether you'd respond or not.
Well,
okay.
The Cyber Center does actually do a lot of that kind of work in communities, and anyway, I won't go through the list, but yes, there's quite an effort. Mostly it's with critical infrastructure, but it's not necessarily at this point with small companies.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. That was great. I don't think we have. Oh, okay. No, we got another question here. Just one more before I hand off to Larry. And considering that some of the top 10 actions are the responsibility of SSC or the Canadians, I won't use acronyms, Shared Services Canada and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, should departments scope these out of their audits?
That's an excellent question. And that was actually one of the reasons why we went ahead to develop the audit program and the audit tools. If you were to ask us what would be the sharing of responsibility for securing your departmental cyberspace in the government of Canada between the departments and Shared Services Canada, the answer is 50-50. Shared Services has its responsibilities in terms of the federal government network, but the departments, all the work that departments have to do is quite significant. And the audit program, a lot of what we have in the audit program are all those areas, our top 10. are all the areas each department and agency are responsible for in terms of the scope of their department. So this is very much focused, our work is not focused at SSC. This is very much focused on each department and what each department has to do. And it's significant.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. And let's see now. Okay. Thank you very much, Robert and Heather. It was
you very
greatly
much.
appreciated. Okay, and now the show turns over to Larry and Brian. Okay, over to you. Okay. Have you got?
Yep. Thank you, Robert.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, this is Larry Stoddard. I've already been introduced, so I won't go through that again. Welcome to the ASTRA demo. ASTRA is software for doing a threat and risk assessment following the RCMP CSE Harmonized Threat and Risk Assessment methodology, which was developed back in about 2006. And since we didn't have any automated tools for doing that methodology, we decided to finally develop one. And we started this work about 3 years ago, I guess now, three and a half, something like that. And it started at Algonquin College as a class project. And from there, it became a co-op work term at CSE, and then eventually it came in-house. Brian Thompson is one of the original students from that class project, and he's now our lead developer and full-time employee at the Cyber Center. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Brian Thompson. And take it away, Brian.
All right, thank you very much, Larry. For anybody that's kind of experiencing ASTRA for the first time, what we've done is created a threat risk assessment tool, so a TRA tool. The idea behind turning it into a tool was to simplify the methodology for individuals that were doing these TRAs. When we were in partnership with the RCMP, we were hearing that a lot of people are using Excel templates, and creating errors, creating inconsistencies. Departments were hiring, say, 3 or 4 contractors to do the TRAs on a single site or system and getting different results across that. So what ASTRA aims to do is to simplify the process, so less training, quicker results, and provide more consistent results. So one way of looking at this is that our objective is to create a TurboTax for doing TRAs. So we've distilled the methodology into this software tool to kind of take the calculations and the methodology away or off the shoulders of the assessor, and allow them to do their job and just assess the site or system. So typically, the workflow for a TRA using a spreadsheet or something is quite linear. Let me see here, HTRA TSG, you'll notice the third one in, we've got vulnerability and control. So this is going to be the main difference between these two streams, and I'll go over those in a little bit. So with the HTRA, we would define our assets, our threats, vulnerability, create that risk and recommendation. Similarly
Larry, Bob Weissman, sorry to interrupt. We have an international audience. So if you could just maybe explain what the acronyms are. Okay, thank you. Sorry
about that. So the HTRA is the Harmonized Threat Risk Assessment, and ITSG was defined earlier. So the TRA, the Threat Risk Assessment process, is to identify the risks to your site or system. So in physical security, you would be doing it on a physical location, and then in the IT realm, your focus would be on that system. So kind of internal networks, et cetera, et cetera. The HTRA stream of things, as I had said, is the physical thing. Examples on this are pretty easy to kind of talk about. So my first portion of this demonstration will be done with the harmonized threat risk assessment in mind. So the scenario will be going towards, we'll be defining that risk. And the scenario will be that we have a bank. Our bank has some gold, which will be our asset. Our threat will be a gold thief. The vulnerability in this risk is going to be that the front door of the bank doesn't have a lock on it. Pretty simple scenario. And then we'll create a recommendation to mitigate that risk. I'll flash over to the ITSG end of things after that, talk a little bit about the controls, how they differ from the vulnerability, and then we'll be going into an ITSG project after the TRA has been completed. So the idea here is that with the HTRA stream, I'm going to show an example of a TRA done on a site now, and then with the ITSG 33 project, we will be revisiting that, checking out the recommendations and applying it, say, a year later when that system is being reassessed. So the TRA could be used at the beginning of a project, in the architecture of it, during a project to assess the security of it, as it stands, and then again, in the life cycle of things, to come back to make sure that that everything is up to the level that we're looking for. So the HTRA will be our scenario of our bank with no lock, and the ITSG 33. The example entries in there are just going to be kind of nonsensical, but what we're looking for on the ITSG example is the effect that a change can have from a recommendation. With the ASTRA workflow, we've kind of broken apart that linear idea that you must create an asset affected by a threat, and the vulnerability with which the threat would access that asset, into three elements that then create a risk. So you see on the ITSG 33 side, the asset, threat, and control go together to make the risk, and on HTRA, the asset, threat, and vulnerability come together to make a risk. And then once that risk is created in the system, we can make a recommendation to mitigate that. So jumping into the tool, the example software that we are showing here today is a standalone installation of this tool. So this is to be put on say a field hardened device. In the case of the RCMP using this, they would put this on a laptop, take it into the field, and do a live TRA on the site that they're doing it on, and then bring the evidence information back to the office. What our team is currently working on as well is a departmental kind of client server end of version of this software, which can be used by an entire department. So we can have teams of individuals working with the same information. So to kick off our HTRA example, we are going to create, say, the Wednesday Bank. Site name, optional. File number, optional. These are if your department is using those things. Classification, our current system on the low side only goes up to protected B. This is modifiable, so if you were to install this on a, say, a TS cleared device, you could go all the way up to top secret. So we'll keep it as unclassified. Our authoriser's risk goal is going to be the level of risk that this site or system is able to, or that we are going to accept for that. Language is on the project. This is bilingual, so the entire application is done in French and English. So by setting a project language to English, all of the tables that we're going to bring into our project are going to pull from the English tables. Similarly, if we had set that to French, it would pull everything from the French tables. The templates, Given time today, I don't know if we'll actually have an opportunity to get into this, so I'll quickly describe what the templates could be used for, using the RCMP again as an example, because it's pretty easy to understand some of the needs that they had. So the RCMP, fairly big outfit, they have detachments all over Canada. These detachments are similar enough that they could be templated, rather than having TRAs done on these detachments by individuals from scratch all across Canada. We've provided this templating system that a single template could be made for the base requirements of the TRA for that detachment, and then distributed to all of the users of this. They could pull it in and have a starting point. So there would be predefined items, predefined threats, predefined risks, and then a user could just use that template to kind of check off what applies to their detachment and then get the risk scenarios out of that. So starting off, all the project info, classification, and authorizer's risk goal that I just entered, we see across the top of the screen. Then we have our assets, threats, vulnerabilities, and risks, and we can see the little zeros beside that, so we don't have anything in there. So what we're going to do is create an asset, our gold, a threat, our gold thief, a vulnerability, the lack of a lock, and then a risk, and then a recommendation. Starting off with the asset, we have the option to create one from scratch. We could pull one from an asset listing, which is basically just a large list of starting point assets. There's hierarchical elements to them, defining the classification of that. But we can also pull something in from another project. So in this case, I've got another bank, let's say, with a gold element that I'm interested in. So just to show the reusability of items in this, you're not kind of locked down to making everything from scratch. The system is very pliable in that you can pull elements from other projects in it should you need them. So we have our gold, class is tangible. The replacement cost is here, and our confidentiality is not applicable, integrity is not applicable, but our availability is high. So we're concerned about the availability of that gold. So we're going to pull that into the project. And we can see it here in a list. High value is going to be that high availability that we're concerned with. And then we can see kind of the defined elements that were from that other project. Jumping over to the threat, we have a similar option. We can create one from scratch. We can use the threat listing, or we could bring one from a template or another project. In this case, we're going to use this threat listing. The asset listing and threat listing are both pulled from documentation from the HTRA methodology. So this is kind of existing listings of very common items. So we can see here, we have the hierarchical components of class, activity, agent category, agent event, kind of building up from vague to granular. And in our event, we are going to search for theft and find our deliberate criminal act, outsider, petty criminal, theft, and bring him into our project. Defining this individual, we will call this individual our gold thief. And we can see that the information from that listing has been pre-populated into this element. Down to our likelihood and capability, this is where we're going to give the definition on what that threat actor is capable of. We have confidentiality, integrity, and availability that can be defined here. In this case, just for this example, we're just going to go with the availability. So the frequency of this attack, the location, and the capabilities. Just to show what's in the dropdowns, we can kind of go from extensive down to limited. Similarly with the frequency, define the amount that this event happens, from this threat actor. And in this case, we will say that this individual has moderate knowledge, skill, moderate resources. And down at the bottom here, we can see there's notes in a file archive. This is on every element of the application. You can add a note just describing something further, or you could add evidence, let's say. So for a control, vulnerability or an asset, anything like that, if you've got documented proof on your assessment of it, it can be attached directly to that file. So we'll save this guy. Again, much like the asset, it gets populated into our list. And again, high value representing that availability. Jumping over to the vulnerability. This on the HTRA end of things is freeform, so we do not have a vulnerability catalog. But again, just like the asset or the threat, we could pull a vulnerability in from another project or template. The title here will be, say, front door lock. Sub-elements in there are optional. We can define them if we want finer granularity, but we can also leave them blank. And then we define the probability of compromise and the severity of outcome. Clicking on these, again, we can see kind of the definition of this. Let's say I have a really good lock on this, probability of compromise is going to be fairly low. The safeguard is moderately effective, but in this case, we have no safeguard. We have no lock on that door. Now, moving over to our risk. Creating the risk scenario is as simple as just linking the three items together. So the title we're going to give this is our gold thief steals gold through the front door. The score will be calculated across the three vectors of that threat against that asset, being the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability. In the case of this example, we've only defined the availability, so we'll see that on there. Additionally, we have the scenario description. If you want to go into further detail on it, there's space for it there. So we do have the option to see, exactly what you're choosing. Should you have a humongous list and you need some help there, and we're going to take that asset and that threat and that vulnerability. On the vulnerability, you may notice at the top here, we have single, parallel, and series. So this is kind of an additional to the risk scenario, just to add a little bit of complexity to it. Today we'll be going through the single scenario, but should say the room that the gold was housed in has a door without the lock, which we've defined, and maybe a window, a barred window. The scenario in parallel would show that the thief would go through the front door. It would calculate the easiest method of attack to our asset. In the case of series, maybe there's 3 doors between the thief and the gold, so the thief would have to overcome each of those. We would see a series attack there, and the most difficult vulnerability to overcome would be used in our representation of the risk score. So calculation of this, our availability risk score is coming out to 80. This is very high, and this is unacceptable to our system. If you remember back at the beginning, I selected medium as the authorizer's risk goal, and we can see that very high is in fact over top of that. And this is not an acceptable risk. Creating a recommendation on that, we will select our front door lock. The vulnerability we know is the lack of a safeguard. The reason for this, we could quite simply repeat what I just said. So lack of safeguard on the front door. You can go into more detail. Lack of safeguard causes an easy entryway for the thief to access it. Our proposed changes are going to be simply to add a lock. We're going to update this modifier. So this is a little bit subjective. What the point of the recommendation section is to come up with a plan to mitigate those risks. So in this case, we're going to suggest a solution to this and come up with kind of a likely outcome of what applying that would do. So right now, we're very high. We want to drop down to very low just to show the extreme things. The life expectancy on our proposed change could say it's 10 years. We'll pop over to the cost of what this recommendation is. Acquisition on this, let's say it's a $2,000 lock, and installation is going to be $500. We can also add resulting profits. There are scenarios where a recommendation may actually make money, but in this case, it's going to be good for 10 years, and it's going to cost $2,500 to execute. I'll add a title to this. So the recommendation is to add a lock. And we can see that the total risk reduction is going to be 4 levels. So we're going from a very high down to a medium. So the strength of that lock versus the strength of that threat is going to drop this risk down to a medium, which is an acceptable point to be at. And we can also see a breakdown of the costs there. So submitting that, we get this entry added to our list where we can see the information. And what I want you to focus on right now is this affected risk, because we'll be looking at that on the ITSG end of things. So in this case, our recommendation brings the idea of this risk from a very high down to a medium, which is an acceptable place to be. Before going over the ITSG thing project, I do think it is important to mention that ASTRA does export an Excel document and a Word document. Pictures of these. So our Word document is basically just a template. Department with specific needs can edit that document or replace it. This is basically just a cookie cutter executive summary with a bunch of filler text describing what the assessor should fill in, and then the ASTRA software will populate the asset threat control or vulnerability and risk tables into these. On the end of the Excel document, it is basically just a massive data dump. So all information entered into the ASTRA software, into those tables, gets transferred into an Excel table. So that shouldn't a need arise where this information needs to be consumed outside of the software, there are 2 methods for that. And then going over to our example A. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the example here is a TRA that has been done on a system, so an IT system. And what I want to focus on here is that we have quite a few risks that are not meeting our authorizer's risk goal. We have recommendations on that, and the recommendation is quite simply that we have an insufficient control or a lack of a control, and our proposed solution to this is to add some enhancements to raise the robustness. So for anybody unfamiliar about the control section, it's a little bit different, actually a lot of bit different than the vulnerability. So both vulnerability and control are describing our safeguards, but they are inverse of each other. So in the event of defining our vulnerabilities in the HTRA mode. We are defining the holes in the system and how big they are, basically. And then on the flip side with the ITSG, we are defining what we have in place to protect us against our threats and how strong they are. The control catalog is distilled into our software from the ITSG 33 control catalog, which is based off the NIST catalog. And opening any of these up, we can see the entries here. So we have our base control for account management, the definition for that, supplemental guidance, and the family, etc. And then we also have enhancements that can be added to those controls to strengthen them. And that's what we're going to focus on right now. So the control that we have affecting our 5 risks is not doing its job right now. So the robustness of this down to an R1, which means that the control is either very weak or doesn't exist in our system. So if our system was following a control profile, so a certain number of controls outlaid to deal with the system that we have, maybe our assessment of this has identified that one of the controls is missing, and maybe 2 of the enhancements. So we're going to go ahead and add those in. And then our enhancements are going to raise the robustness of this from our R1 all the way up to an R5, just for the sake of the example. In real life, the R5 would be a very, very expensive addition to your system to protect against all numbers of threats. But as far as the example goes, we're going to see a great change by doing this. So we're going to go from R1 all the way up to R5. Save that. And then those risks that we saw earlier are all going to tick over, be updated live, and we can see that representation there. So the power inlaid in this is that we can start a project. We can use the ASTRA software to create a TRA to architect what we want to build. We can do an assessment on that, build the actual thing, do an assessment on where we stand then, and then when that TRA expires, we can come back to that with our recommendations that were kind of outlaid at that last moment and identify what has changed over that year. And hopefully we'll see positive effects because the recommendations had been followed and applied in that way. We are at 10 minutes left, so I'll break for now and we'll hop over to the question section. Unless, Larry, there is anything that you wanted to add before pausing the demonstration.
No, thanks, Brian. That was good. I don't have anything else to add to the demo. I guess we'll sit back and wait for questions.
Okay, well, the first question is, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
great. Okay, ASTRA looks really cool. Would CSE share that tool with departments?
Do you want, oh, go ahead, Brian, if you want to answer.
Oh, yeah, so departments of the Government of Canada have access to ASTRA through the Learning Hub at CSE.
Learning Hub.
So yeah, anybody with a Learning Hub account will find access to ASTRA through the dashboard. And in there, you'll find the download for the standalone and any additional documentation. So we've got a user guide in both languages and some additional information. And then once you're part of that, any announcements that we make, so any updates, any new releases, anybody part of that group will be alerted of that.
Can anybody outside the government have access to the ASTRA?
At present, no. Oh, Larry, you want to field this one?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, not right now, but a future release, it might not be exactly the same as this one, but something similar will be available publicly.
Great.
we're continuing to develop this, and we have another version, which is, and this is a standalone version that runs well like on a laptop or a single host. We're also developing an enterprise version, which will, go into a enterprise database as the back end and be a client server type of app with a client front end and integrate with your enterprise authentication system like LDAP or Microsoft Active Directory and that sort of thing, so that the authentication will be an enterprise authentication, not actually directly part of our app itself. Once that's more mature, we're going to release a version to the public, and that version will likely be something that you can customize a little bit more than this one, because this is really geared for an enterprise audience or a government audience, right?
Yep.
So people outside of government probably want to change things like the confidentiality labels, because maybe they don't use top secret, secret, and confidential and all that stuff. But those are things that we don't want the government audience doing. So we'll end up with two versions, one for in government and one for outside of government.
I think to keep it simple there for small and medium enterprises, to introduce it and then have a simple version and then one that's more enterprise level would be interesting. What is okay, just a second, sorry, I'm just going to I'm not sure you see the screen or not. I'm just putting the question on top. What's the security around ASTRA itself? Is it you mentioned it could be installed on a laptop, but that was the thing. I mean, it's an unclassed system, correct?
Yeah. So ASTRA's designed to work in a system high security mode of operation. If people understand what that means. So if you want to do top secret TRAs, then the application needs to be hosted in a top secret network.
Yeah.
If you want to be in a, if you want to do secret TRAs, then it should be in at least a secret network. And if you're working at the PB level, then it needs to be in a PB network. So most of its security comes from the hosting environment, whether it's the laptop, the desktop, or the enterprise network. But we do have security controls built into it as well. It's got discretionary access control kind of built in. We will integrate with the enterprise authentication in the enterprise version. I think we have labeling, so you can label your TRA with the appropriate security marking, which can also be set by the administrator to a maximum. So if you install it on a secret network, you can set the maximum acceptable classification to secret. So you can't go and label a top secret TRA on a secret network. Yep. It won't let you do that. I can't think of all the things we've got in there, but we've got security controls appropriate for its mode of operation and its purpose, right?
Okay, so it's network-centric security, so it's fair enough. No,
yeah,
I think it's
similar to buying a Microsoft Office app and putting it into a classified network.
Yep.
Except we do have some additional security controls that your standard off-the-shelf stuff doesn't have.
Yep. What did we just? As you mentioned, threat risk assessment mode defined holes, and IT security guidance 33, the security controls mode defines safeguards. It seems that the IT security guidance 33 is more popular, more complete solution. Do you plan to release IT security guidance 33 based version of ASTRA? I was under the impression from the presentation that was already integrated. Could you correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah, so the application does both frameworks. It's built in. It's just you just select which one you want to use in a given project, but the logic is in the app.
Yeah, I may have been moving a little quick there. So midway through there, I was actually switching over to a different project that had been based off of the ITSG 33. So the creation of the project, you select the lane with which you go down, and then all calculations are done specific to that mode.
So the real difference between the 33 one and the what I'll call the classic HTRA methodology is that we made some substitutions for the inputs in order that you could use directly data that you're capturing as part of the ITSG 33. So for those of you who don't know what ITSG 33 is, part of it deals with secure system lifecycle development. And baked into that development lifecycle is actually doing a TRA. We don't actually call it out, but it's baked in. So things, when you're following that process, you're collecting information like, what robustness your controls are or need to be, what threat levels you're trying to build to, the TD levels. You're following the security control catalog, which is part of 33, which is really just the NIST 853 catalog, Canadianized. So in order to leverage all that information that's collected as part of the ITSG 33 development process, we made these changes so that so it's plug and play, right? So when you put in your threat levels, you don't have to make them up or use the ones that are in HTRA, which are a little bit kind of open-ended, and there's a lot of room for subjectivity in the classic HTRA methodology.
Okay, HTRA, for the audience, is the Harmonized Threat Risk Assessment. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so the ITSG 33 variant is the same methodology, but it's calibrated a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So we've calibrated the threat inputs, and we've calibrated the security control. The safeguard effectiveness is basically calibrated with our robustness levels from ITSG 33. So that's really the key differences. So what that does is it makes the process a bit more repeatable. So you could have two people doing the task and have more of a chance that they're going to come to the same conclusion. There's less subjectivity, right? So the assessment of robustness is well defined. It's not left to the assessor's point of view of, well, I think that safeguard is strong. Well, no. To be a strong safeguard, to me that means you're at robustness level 4 or 5. There's certain criteria that you have to meet to be able to claim that, and you either meet it or you don't. Right? It's not as subjective as the HTRA methodology itself, which leaves a lot to the assessor's opinion.
The discretion, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question, I just got two more. Is the ASTRA going to be incorporated as a requirement? Now, CPA SA skill set for performing threat risk assessment in government departments. CPSA stands for? Do you have your? No, I mean, no. We've got to be careful when we're using the acronyms across all these different silos. I have no idea what CPSA stands for.
Is that the audit thing?
Okay, could well be a certified public security. Okay, could be an auditor skill set. But all I'm saying is right now is ASTRA going to be incorporated in government sets, skill sets.
Well, we will have training through our learning center for the ASTRA tool.
Okay.
So there will be training available through the Cyber Center Learning Hub.
Mm-hmm.
As to whether or not it becomes mandated across government, that's a TBS question, right? So TBS is aware of the project. They've got their own instance of it that they've been playing with. As to whether or not they mandate it or not, I don't know.
I've just got a question before the last one. I know there's a subset of IT that the IT security guidance, because the number of controls in there is rather awesome. Have you implemented the sort of a subset within the tool set, a mandatory subset, and then do you understand?
Yeah, so that's kind of the template function will let you do that. So you can make a template of security controls. So if you were doing, because the entire catalog is 1,100 something controls and enhancements, I think. Mm-hmm. But most organizations, you're not doing the whole catalog, right? It's a catalog. It's like, I don't buy the Sears catalog every year, right? I pick and choose what I want from it. Yep. So we have security control profiles that are for specific things. So what we'll have eventually is templates for some of the major profiles. If an organization wants to make their own profile, they can do that with the templating function and basically create a list of the controls that they want to deal with.
Okay. Okay,
So,
great.
so you don't have to work from scratch from the entire catalog all the time. Once you have the templates developed for the different profiles, then it'll be much less work.
Okay, super. You asked that question. You can do a subset. Now, this is just a quick one. Does it run only on Windows or Mac as well?
So right now we just have it on Windows.
Yep.
It's actually really easy for us to make a build for other environments like Android, iOS, Mac OS. But until we have this one, the Windows one, like kind of fully completed, the enterprise version, and are looking for things to do, because right now we still have a lot of development to do. We probably would entertain, if there's enough demand, creating a build for a different OS.
Well, listen, Robert, Heather, Brian, and Larry, thank you ever so much for presenting. It's been a great presentation. And anyways, we'll make available some of the presentation recording, of course, will be made available to attendees, as will the presentation itself. I'm not sure what we'll do for the ASTRA software demo. You've seen an example of that in the recording. That'll suffice. But if you have any questions, the contact information will be provided. So thank you ever so much for presenting. Really appreciate the effort you've put in, and this is the second time, and it's great to see the progress made in the cyber audit field. Okay, for that. So with that, attendees, you're going to be, we'll be signing off for the day. Tomorrow morning, we'll be starting off at 9 o'clock. So please, when you take a look at the event, okay, tomorrow we're going to be taking a look at, we'll be having a presentation from the National Institute of Smart Government in India. They've been undergoing major digital transformation there, and it's quite different from a typical Western transformation, what they've been going through. In some ways, they can move much faster. They'll be talking about digital transformation of a high security organization in the era of COVID. That's going to be Rachel Porteous from FinTrack. We'll be having a successful digital transformation journey by thwarting the cyber attackers. This is a very unique, it's at arm's length from government, but it's an association that's created a the cybersecurity tracking threat exchange network. And Robert Gordon, who used to be in government as an assistant deputy minister, will give the presentation there. Then Dr. Abril will be back, and he'll be looking at how to select a digital public service implementation orientation that's been used in the European Union in a complex environment. We'll be taking a look again at analytics-based research management. This comes out of the business school. Dr. Greg Richards is going to be presenting that. And you'll talk more about how can we get analytics in terms of how well is our digital transformation going. Then Christian Sauvé will be talking about business-driven enterprise architecture practice in a small agency. And concurrently in stream 2 will be how to apply a human-centric approach in a complex and emotionally charged environment by Amarjeet Kaur. It's a really good presentation in terms of applying design practices for software. And at the end of the day, we're going to have Dr. Vic Pad from the Natural Resources Canada, and he'll be talking about science and policy integration, integrating what's the technology and the policy into overall digital transformation. They have an NRCan, Natural Resources Canada. They have a digital accelerator and a technology readiness assessment. I really encourage you to stay, to basically take that presentation in. It looks really fascinating. And then at the end of time, that'll be the end of Digital Transformation in Government 2021. So thank you very much for your time and energy. I'll be ending the session now, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow.